what's going on, guys? My name is Ferrum and welcome to yet another video where this time I am bringing the long-awaited Dark Magician deck that I run. As you can see in my nice Dark Magician sleeves, I have this deck sealed up, ready to go. And finally, it is time to get into this Magician deck. Before I get into this, a little bit of background before we begin is that this deck is the only deck that I have ever built specifically to make the 40 card minimum. Now, the difference is between a 40 card deck, 50 card deck, or 60 card deck as far as anyone's concerned. The 40 card deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is the absolute minimum you're allowed to use, and it actually is optimized for the most potential as far as how good your draws are and how good that you end up pulling cards that you need at the right time. However, with a bigger deck, so either 50 cards or anywhere higher than 40 at a maximum of 60, you get into territory of sometimes you brick, sometimes you don't. And honestly, it's okay sometimes. It happens. I've bricked quite a few times in my Blue Eyes deck, but that deck has its own share of issues and has a lot more of a win ratio than this deck does, even though this deck is very much consistent with keeping a really good tight hold on the Spellcaster archetype itself. Now, without further ado, let's get into this. Now, before you, I have my monsters. And to start things off, I have 2 copies of my Mythical Beast Cerberus. Now, Mythical Beast Cerberus works in a way of it gets out on itself whenever it plays a card, or whenever you play a spell card, or whenever a spell card is activated to begin with. You place a spell counter on this card when the spell resolves, and this card gains 500 attack. It is a base 1400 attack point, attack and defense, I should say. If damage calculation is conducted involving this card, remove all spell counters from that. So by the end, what that means is you can accumulate as many spell counters as you want on this particular card. And, you know, say I have a couple right here. So you put 500 attack, 1000, 1500. As soon as you hit battle with another creature, those spell counters disappear. Which is fine and all because it's still a really good, easy monster to summon and works well with this deck as far as I'm aware, or as far as I'm concerned. Just gonna put them over here. Next up, we have 2 copies of Magician's Robe. It's a really high defense monster with only 2 stars, which isn't bad. Its effect reads, during your opponent's turn, you can discard 1 spell or trap card, special summon 1 Dark Magician from your deck. This is a quick effect, which means you can activate it at any time. During your opponent's turn, if you activate a spell card, or trap card, or effect while this card is in your graveyard, except for the damage step, you can special summon this card, but banish it when it leaves the field. So it gives you some extra potential to summon another monster, and works well with defense as well, with a 2000 point defensive range. Alright, moving on, we have 2 copies of Magician's Rod. Now, Magician's Rod is probably one of the easiest excavator cards in this deck. With a 1600 attack points, its effect is when this card is normal summoned, you can add 1 spell or trap card from your deck to your hand that specifically lists the Dark Magician in its text. During your opponent's turn, you can activate 1 spell or a spell or trap card or effect while this card is in your graveyard, or except during the damage step. You contribute 1 spellcaster monster, add this to your hand. I'll activate this once per turn. So basically, anytime this is summoned, you get to add a card that specifically lists Dark Magician, which does mean, or a spell card which means you have things like Dark Magic Veil and certain other cards that I will show later, as this deck is based around the Sorcerer Supreme himself. Alright, moving on. A little something to break open the cascade of more uncommon cards. I have Chocolate Magician Girl in this deck. So 1 copy of her. She is essentially the same attack points as Magician's Rod at 1600 and 1000 defense. Once per turn, you can discard 1 spell counter or spellcaster type monster, draw 1 card. Once per turn, if this card is targeted for an attack, you can target 1 spellcaster monster in your graveyard except Chocolate Magician Girl, special summon it, then change the attack target to it. If you do, the attacking monster's attack becomes half its current. which is really good for defense, as well as like, oh, you can special summon a Dark Magician or a Dark Magician Girl, and then your opponent's attacking monster basically gets cut in half as far as how strong it is, which is really good for a defensive play if you really do need it. Alright, up next, one of my favorite spell counter oriented cards, Breaker the Magical Warrior. Now you can see here I have a gold rare one. I've pulled this a long time ago and I've loved it. I don't know if you guys can see how goldy that is. Maybe I'll just do that. No, that doesn't. Oh, there we go. There we go. Anyway, Breaker, when he is normal summoned, you may put a spell counter on it, maximum of 1. This card's attack gain is increased by 300 for each spell counter on it. You can remove 1 spell counter from this card and to destroy 1 spell or trap card on the field. Any spell or trap. Which means if your opponent has a field spell that is causing you issues, it's going to be able to break through that defense. And equally, you go from a 1600 attack point monster without a spell counter to a 1900. And if you decide to have things like Magical Citadel Endymion, that would move a counter to somewhere else, which would work on this as well. The only downside is only used once, so you can only use it once, but even then, if you have more spell counters on a card that you can move to this, it works really well. Moving on, we have 3 copies of the Keeper of Dragon Magic. The reason why this is in here and not a full-on just spell card or spell counter or spellcaster is a dragon monster with 1800 attack points and 300 defense. Its effect reads: if this monster is special or normal summoned, you can discard 1 card, add a polymerization normal spell or a fusion normal spell from your deck to your hand. You can reveal 1 fusion monster in your extra deck, special summon 1 of the fusion materials whose name specifically lists that monster from your graveyard in face-down defense position. Additionally, you can only use this each effect of Keeper Dragon Magic once per turn. You cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck except fusion monsters the rest of this turn. That basically means if you have something like, well, this actually works really good in Blue Eyes decks as well. If you just lost a Blue Eyes White Dragon a couple turns ago and you need to bring this, you can discard something that's kind of useless, like say a Pot of Greed, or unless you didn't play it, or something that's blocking you, like say a Chaos Form that doesn't work because you've already used that once per turn. You can use this card additionally to bring back a Blue Eyes or any fusion-oriented material, like say Dark Magician for Amulet Dragon, or say Dark Magician Girl. It is a really good searcher and a really good returner. Like, yeah, face-down defense position, it's not that bad as long as you can protect it. And worst case scenario, you can always block to bring other things out. Additionally, with some of the other defense cards that are in this deck. Additionally, we have 2 copies of Skilled Dark Magician. Now, this is a 1900 attack point monster with the effect of each time a spell counter card is activated, you place a spell counter on this card. Maximum 3. You can tribute this card with 3 spell counters on it to special summon 1 Dark Magician from your hand, deck, or graveyard. Really good searcher, and yes, even though it does take a while to kind of get going, if you have a handful of spells that you need to use, you can instantly do that turn 1, turn 2, turn 3. Otherwise, it's a really good defense, or a really good option for any attack, and realistically, it works really well, in my opinion, for decks like this. Coming up next, we have 2 copies of Dark Magician Girl, because you can't have Dark Magician without the leading lady as well. Her effect reads, this card gains 300 attack for each Dark Magician or Magician of Black Chaos in other player's graveyard. So, saying you're playing against another person who uses Dark Magicians, like say if it's me versus Shadow. This card, no matter what, gains attack points equal to either one. And with a 2000 base attack at level 6, it's not terrible. There are better cards out there, but for this effect, it works just fine. Moving on to the counterpart of this, or an alternate version of this card, I should say, we have Apprentice Illusion Magician. Her effect reads, you can special summon this card from your hand by discarding 1 card. So same level and attack points as Dark Magician Girl, however much easier to summon, as long as you have a card to spare. If this card is normal summoned or special summoned, you can add 1 Dark Magician from your deck to your hand. During damage calculations, if another Dark Spellcaster monster battles an opponent's monster, quick effect, you can send this card from your hand or face up on the field to the graveyard. That monster you control gains 2,000 attack and defense during the damage step only, which is really good, especially for, say, if you're baiting your opponent into what is called a suicide. Up next, we have 2 copies of Magician of Dark Illusion, kind of a swap version of Dark Magician, who has 2,500 attack points and 2,100 defense points. This card swaps that as 21 for attack and 25 for defense. His effect reads, this card's name becomes Dark Magician while it's on the field. You can only use each effect of this card once per turn. During your opponent's turn, you can activate, if you activate a spell or a trap card or effect except during the damage step, special summon this card from your hand. If you activate a spell card or a trap card or effect while this card is on the field, except during the damage step, you can target 1 Dark Magician near your graveyard, special summon it. Only able to use once per turn. So again, really good option if you have nothing else to use, and therefore if your opponent is inadvertently setting you up for the win. Moving on to the last 4 cards in the deck, we have Palladium Oracle Mahad. So another kind of Dark Magician card that kind of works in the same light. His effect reads, if you draw this card, you can reveal it, special summon it from your hand. If this card battles a dark monster, its attack is doubled during the damage step only. If this card is destroyed by battle or card effect, you special summon 1 Dark Magician from your hand, deck, or graveyard. So immediately, if you are, say, turn 2, you do this, you do turn 2 start, and you end up drawing this first turn. That is an immediate summon, and then if it's destroyed by battle or card effect, you then retrieve a Dark Magician from anywhere, basically, except for the banish pile. And last but not least, 3 copies of the Dark Magician himself, which, in my opinion, this one here is my favorite, but the OG works just as well. The headliner for the deck, of course, you cannot not run as many copies of this, though it's not recommended in this kind of deck, but it works with what I have going for it in the row over here. But anywho, let me just clean up this little spot here, and we will get into the spells. Alright, so first off, we're going to use, or have a little look at some of the other cards I run that aren't its supports. First off, we have the continuous spell Absorption. Each time a spell card is activated, you gain 500 life points immediately after it resolves. This is a good card for, say, your low on life points, and all you have to do is bait your opponent to using spell cards, or with the stack that I have here, you have a good little chunk of spells that you can activate on the fly. And with an extra 500 life points, you can do quite a bit more toward your opponent. Up next, we have Monster Reborn, a easy staple. It's limited down to once since basically it showed up. Everyone knows what this does, but just to recap, target 1 monster at either player's graveyard and special summon it. So you know that Blue Eyes Ultimate that you just destroyed? You can use it. You lost a Dark Magician, you can bring it back. Very simple. Up next, we have some of the Dark Magician support cards. So we have Dark Magical Circle, a continuous spell card that reads, while this card is activated, look at the top 3 cards of your deck and then reveal 1 Dark Magician or 1 spell or trap card that specifically lists the card Dark Magician and its text among them. Add it to your hand. Also place the remaining cards on top of your deck in any order. If Dark Magician is normal summoned or special summoned to your field except during the damage step, you can target 1 card on your opponent's field, banish it. You can use each effect of this card once per turn. Really good for removal and just keeping your opponent at bay when you need a bit more time to set up your plays. And with Dark Magician, it is very easy to set up those plays. We have the quick play spell, Dark Magic Expanded. Its effect reads, apply the effects in sequence based on the number of Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl cards on the field and in the graveyards. 1 or more. One dark spellcaster on the field gains 1,000 attack until the end of this turn. 2 or more, this turn your opponent cannot activate cards and effects in response to your spells and traps, or effect activations. Also, spells and traps you control cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. And finally, 3 or more dark spellcaster monsters you can currently control are unaffected by your opponent's card effects until the end of this turn. So right there, if you have 2 Dark Magicians and a Dark Magician Girl in your graveyard, all 3 of these effects apply at once. And let me tell you, I have never used this for more than its first or second effect, but if I get down to the third one, it is really good to have. Next up we have Dark Magic Inheritance, another quick play spell. Banish 2 spells from your graveyard and add 1 spell or trap card from your deck to your hand that specifically lists the card Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl in its text, except Dark Magic Inheritance. You can activate this once per turn. So another good searcher by banishing 2 spells that you don't need anymore from your graveyard. We have Secrets of Dark Magic, another quick play spell that is really used or handy for either a ritual side or a fusion side of things. So activate one of the following effects. Fusion summon 1 fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from your hand or field, including Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl as materials. Or ritual summon 1 ritual monster from your hand by attributing monsters from your field or hand, including Dark Magician and Dark Magician Girl, whose total levels equal or exceed the level of the ritual monster. Really good for a Magician of Black Chaos or Black Chaos Max. We have Dark Magic Curtain up next, another kind of staple. Pay half your life points, special summon 1 Dark Magician from your deck. You cannot summon any other monsters the turn you activate this effect, but you can send, which is really good for some other plays. And if you need a little bit of boost from, say, 100 life points and you're just holding on by it for dear life, this is good to have just in case. The other side of that is Dark Magic Veil. Its effect reads, pay 1,000 life points, special summon 1 Dark Spellcaster type monster from your graveyard or your hand, which can apply to Dark Magician Girl, Dark Magician, or any of the spellcasters that we have seen so far that aren't, say, Keeper of Dragon Magic or the like. Up next we have Swords of Revealing Light, another kind of old staple to the game that has been around for many, many years. This effect reads, flip all monsters your opponent controls face up. This card remains in the field for 3 of your opponent's turns. While this card is face up, monsters your opponent controls cannot declare an attack on you. So basically this gives you 3 turns to do whatever you need to do. And realistically, unless somebody wants to MST this, it's still pretty good to use. Up next we have 2 copies of the quick play spell Successor Soul. Kind of a new card that has been released recently, but it's actually been making waves as far as effect decks. So its effect reads, tribute 1 effect monster, then target 1 effect monster your opponent controls and send it to the graveyard. Then special summon 1 level 7 or higher normal monster from your hand or deck. You can only activate 1 Successor Soul per turn. You can only attack with 1 monster the turn you activate this effect. So, again, kind of going back to the Blue Eyes example, say your opponent has a, well, let's say, a Magician's Rod that you want to get away very quickly, and you have something like King of Dragons. You can send both those cards away and summon a Luster Dragon number 2 or a Blue Eyes White Dragon or even a Dark Magician at that point, and therefore having a really powerful monster with only 1 attack. However, you can take advantage of that and put other plays into that and just make it work. And finally, the last spell card in this deck I run is Eye of Timaeus. This is the only fusion card in my deck other than Secrets of Dark Magic. However, this is made for one of 3 options in my deck. This card is always treated as Legendary Dragon Timaeus. Target 1 Dark Magician monster you control, fusion summon 1 fusion monster from your extra deck that lists that monster on the field as fusion material, using it as fusion material. You'll use 1 of these per turn. And you'll see exactly what 3 I use in this deck a little bit later on, once I get past the trap cards. And finally, the last 5 cards of this entire deck. First off, we're going to use Miracle's Wake. Now, Miracle's Wake has been around since the 5Ds era of things. Basically, it is a trap card that says target one monster that was destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard this turn, special summon it back. Now, this card in particular has saved my butt a few times, no matter what deck it's ever been put in. Because say I have a really powerful monster that I need to keep on the field, but it just got destroyed by my opponent's stronger monster or an effect, or by battle, and I had no way out except for this. No monster born, no nothing else. This has kept that in the field and made my comeback quite a bit. Next up we have, I think, Shadow's favorite trap card other than maybe Magical Hats, Magic Cylinder, which has made me lose against her quite a few times. When an opponent's monster declares an attack, target the attacking monster, negate the attack, and if you do, inflict damage to your opponent equal to its attack. So picture this. In my Sacred Beasts deck, that basically came out of the structure deck as well, I swung at her for 10,000 attack points with the ace monster of that deck. She popped this and killed me instantly. This can work for a lot of things unless your opponent does or has negation of target effects, which this indeed does. However, it's really good to have and just basically kind of FU to your opponent. Next up we have Destined Rivals. Now, this trap card I've rarely used, but I've used it maybe once or twice. It has come in clutch those 2 times, but otherwise it is still just another trap card I put in here just to make sure that I have less than what I would think I would need. Its effect reads, if you control Blue Eyes White Dragon or Dark Magician, negate the effects of all face-up monsters your opponent currently controls until the end of this turn. You'll activate this once per turn. Of course, a card that powerful can and will kind of throw you off your game. The last 2 trap cards of this deck are Eternal Soul, which is a continuous trap card that basically reads, every Dark Magician in your monster zone is unaffected by your opponent's spell cards, or card effects. If this face-up card leaves the field, destroy all monsters you control. You can only use the following effects of Eternal Soul once per turn. You'll activate one of these effects. Special summon 1 Dark Magician from your hand or graveyard, or add 1 Dark Magic attack or Thousand Knives card from your deck to your hand. Again, another really good staple for returning Dark Magicians to and from your field at any given time. However, it has the downside of if this ever leaves the field, your monsters go with it, which leaves you wide open. It is quite a double-edged sword as it gives you benefits and takes them away on a whim. And the last card in the deck is Magician's Navigation. Special summon 1 Dark Magician from your hand, then special summon 1 level 7 or lower Dark Spellcaster monster from your deck. If you control Dark Magician except the turn this card was activated, or to the graveyard, sorry, you can banish this card from your graveyard, then target 1 face-up spell or trap your opponent controls. Negate its effects until the end of this turn. It is also a really good thing that if that card ever leaves the field, which by your own accord it should, and you've used that effect, you can basically bring up a instant or a 1-turn block for any effect that would essentially harm your monsters, and at the same point work in your favor. Now, before we end the video, we're going to look at my extra deck. First off, we're going to look at the Xyz, then go into my Synchros, and then go into my Fusions. So first of all, we have Ebon High Magician, which requires 2 level 7 spellcaster type monsters. It has 2300 attack, 2300 attack points and 2800 defense points, so it should be summoned in defense mode. While this card has Xyz materials, you can activate a quick play spell or trap card from your hand. during your opponent's turn by declaring one exceeds material, or by detaching one exceeds material. One exceeds material from this card to activate. If this exceeds summon monster is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, if it's exceeds summoned card you control. If this exceeds summon control, I'm sorry, I can't freaking read today, is sent to the graveyard by an opponent's card effect, you special summon one Dark Spellcaster type monster from your hand or deck, and then destroy one card on the field. Really good by chance of just getting or making sure that you have those level 7s in the field. So I personally would go into Successor Soul or say Destined Rebels. One of these trap cards or spell cards that would assist in that, making it possible. For the synchros, we have Arcanite Magician, which is basically just a spell counter player that is rarely used very often, but it can be a staple in some decks. It requires one tuner or one or more non-tuner spellcaster type monsters. If this card is synchro summoned, place 2 spell counters on it. This card gains 1,000 attack for each spell counter on it. You can remove one spell counter from your field, then target one card your opponent controls to destroy that target. So at a base 400 attack points and 800 defense points, it makes sense that the spell counters would be a heavy thing. So running this with Magical Citadel of Endymion, Pitch Black Power Stone, or some other stuff that would generate spell counters for you, works out really well in this card's favor. Next up, and the final synchro, is TG Hyper Librarian. This card is, I think, on the limited list right now. At last I checked. It is a level 5 spellcaster synchro tuner, or synchro, that requires one tuner and one or more non-tuner monsters. If a monster is synchro summoned, draw one card. This card must be face up on the field to activate and resolve this effect. With a base 2,400 attack points and 800 defense points, it is basically the exact same as Arcanite Magician, except bar none that the stats are not the same. This starts out with 400 and gains 1,000 for each spell counter. This is base 2,400. Getting to the fusions now, we have some of the big boys that inhabit this deck. So first of all, I'm going to hit you with 3 copies of Amulet Dragon. Amulet Dragon requires a Dark Magician and 1 Dragon monster, hence either Eye of TIMAEUS or Keeper of Dragon Magic. Must be fusion summoned with the above material monsters or with the Eye of TIMAEUS. If this card is special summoned, target a number of spell cards in the graveyard's minimum 1. Banish those targets, and if you do, this card's attack grows by 100 for each card banished this way. If this card is destroyed, you can target one spellcaster from your deck and special summon that target. With 2,900 attack points to start with, it is a really good quick play to use early in the gate. Next up, we have 3 copies of Dark Magician Girl, the Dragon Knight. Her effect reads: requires Dark Magician and 1 Dragon. Must be fusion summoned with the above fusion materials or with the Eye of TIMAEUS. Once per turn quick effect, you can send 1 monster or 1 card from your hand to the graveyard, then target 1 face-up card on the field and destroy it. With a starting 2,600 attack points and 1,700 defense points, it works as a really good counter to a lot of other plays. In which case I can stand the test to, because I've had this card used on me quite a few times with Jess's Shadow's spellcaster deck. Next up, we have Dark Magician the Dragon Knight. And you may be wondering, why only 1? Well, I've only ever drawn 2, and I ended up giving my other copy to Jess because she also has a Dark Magician deck, though it's more of a spell counter deck. So this one, effect read, Dark Magician, 1 Dragon type monster required. This card's name becomes Dark Magician while it's on the field or in the graveyard. Your opponent cannot target spell or trap cards you control with card effects. Also, they cannot be destroyed by card effects. With 3,000 attack points and 2,500 defense points, here is your Blue Eyes the deck, and at the cost of 2 monsters using a fusion. So whether it is Eye of TIMAEUS, or if I throw in a Polymerization or a Secret to Dark Magic, this is the way you're going to do it. And finally, the last card of this deck is the Ultimate Magician card I have ever drawn. This card is Quintet Magician. Now keep in mind, this is basically the equivalent of 5-Headed Dragon. It requires 5 spellcaster monsters. It must be fusion summoned, and this card is fusion summoned using 5 spellcasters with different names, you can destroy all cards your opponent currently controls. This face-up card on the field cannot be attributed nor used for fusion. Also, it cannot be destroyed by card effects. It is 4,500 attack points and defense points strong. Hard as hell to summon, but if you get it on the field, you basically got it almost an instant win. Anywho, guys, thank you so much for joining me on this journey. I know it's been a while since I have actually done a deck breakdown, and yes, even though I did promise this deck breakdown as far as after my Blue Eyes video, this deck in particular is probably one of my favorites to ever play. And yes, it is a little bit of a soft spot for me as far as the original series, though I more stand on the side of Blue Eyes, obviously. But this deck I've had a lot of fun with. I've played a while, and I will play it over and over again until I no longer have need of it. And then at this point, I would give it to Shadow in terms of playability. Now, if you guys have any more questions or have any suggestions on what deck I would or I could do next, I have my Crystal Beast deck, I have my Uriah Sacred Beast Trap deck, or my Witchcrafter deck. If you'd like to see them as well, leave the suggestions in the comment below. Give me your feedback as to how you like this. I'm sorry also the audio is a little bit rough. It has been tricky finding the right mic and setup for doing this kind of stuff. However, we're just trying to get in the way of getting that done. So if you like this, leave a like, comment down below again. You already know what. Share this with your friends and family if you don't mind, and if you haven't already, subscribed and click that notifications so you do not miss any videos that are coming your way. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you guys in the next video.